Starting the recording now. All right, you guys, well, welcome. We're in part 2 training. So basically what we cover in this particular training is primarily what's pretty much important to you guys. So we're going to be talking about the scheduler a little bit and the functionality of the scheduler. And there are a couple customizable features I want to make sure I point out to you guys that you're aware of with regard to the schedule. And then we'll talk about the documentation workflow. We'll load into a patient's chart, discuss the evaluation, the treatment plan, and session notes and progress notes, that sort of thing. So I'm going to be logging into a test database to do all this so that I'm not sort of creating this all this documentation and stuff on your database. So when I log in, go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick. I know the last time, oh, never mind. You're good. Keep going.
Okay. So I'm going to be logging in as if I'm one of the therapists. Okay, I'm going to be a speech therapist, I believe, for this particular demonstration. And so I'll be logging in as if I'm one of the therapists in the clinic. Okay, that'll be creating the documentation. So again, I'll be using my credentials. Okay, so again, as I land, always logging into ClinicSource. If you haven't figured this out by now, your landing page will always be the scheduler. So my schedule is highlighted up top. The main view of my screen is looking at the schedule, and today I'm just looking at Friday, June 3rd. I can punch out the day, week, month, timeline view, however I want to see it. Personally, I'm kind of a week view guy, so I want to see my week view. And I've got some appointments on the schedule here. So I'm going to go in here and clean these out real quick. So they're not there. All right. So again, this is my view of my schedule. So on the left-hand side, the main part of the screen is my actual schedule. What's the active schedule is going on. The left side is sort of my navigation pane for my schedule. This main window, I can move forward in time, backward in time using the calendar. So I could see availability next week, or I could go back and see my past history going backwards. The second section right here in this middle portion is sort of my view of the clinic. And since you guys have multiple disciplines, since I logged in as Colin Renner, it's sort of showing me just Colin Renner's schedule. So I'm really only looking at the schedule that I have events for. So it's only showing me Colin Renner's schedule. If I had another therapist under here, I could click on that therapist's name and just see their schedule. Okay, so I could be sort of zeroed in on the individual. But as I start climbing up this tree, it'll start opening up, or I'll be getting a wider viewpoint of my schedule. So if I were to click on speech therapy, I would be seeing not everybody under speech therapy on the schedule at the same time. If I were to click on physical therapy, I would be seeing everybody under physical therapy. OT, I'd be seeing everybody under occupational therapy. So this is how I would view everybody under individual disciplines. But if I wanted to see everything at the same time, get the fire hose right, I'd select view all, and that's going to be everything, all the speech therapy appointments, all the occupational therapy appointments, and all the physical therapy appointments. So again, just remember, as you climb up that tree, it gives you a wider viewpoint of what you're looking at with regards to your schedule. Down below, I have a couple patients here that I will be using for my demonstration. I have John Snow and I have Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson has 0 clinical information in his patient file, where John Snow, I have some clinical documentation in his patient file. So we'll be using both of those for my example today. Okay. So right out of the gates, I mentioned that there were a couple of bits of information with regard to the schedule that you guys can customize for your organization. So I want to point those out because this may become, it's even more important as you guys have multiple disciplines to sort of create these customizable features. So I'm just going to click on any date and time. It doesn't matter, as if I'm creating an appointment, so that I can highlight these 2 features. The first one is you can create customizable types of appointments. Okay, so I could create an OT therapy appointment, a PT therapy appointment, a speech therapy type of appointment. So when I hit this down arrow, I'll have all different types available to me. You're going to have sort of the out of the box default stuff, therapy appointment, evaluation, maybe lunch, breaks, this sort of thing. But that's just a generic that comes out of the box. You can certainly break it up however you want to break up the appointments. You can create any type of appointment that you want. And as you can see, I have 30-minute appointments. I have Amanda therapy appointments. I have aquatic therapies. I have Collins evaluation. I can do a Collin therapy. So really, I can sort of really nail down and exactly sort of delineate one appointment from the other versus just having a regular therapy appointment. Well, what type of therapy appointment? Is it a physical? Is it a PT? Is it an OT, right? So you can really break it down however you want by creating a customizable type available to you when you hit the drop-down list. The one thing that I will recommend is right out of the gates, be very deliberate when you're creating these customizable types of appointments. Because as soon as I create a type and I use it, the problem is that I will have an issue with deleting it. Once it's used, I can't delete it. Okay, so that's one thing because it becomes part of that 7-year records thing. Okay. And then the next item that we can customize are what we call the resources. So typically in your schedule, you guys won't see this option out of the box because it has nothing populated under resources. For resources, you can use examination rooms. You can use equipment that you may need with you in the examination room at this particular appointment. You can use assistants that you may want to have with you. So really, you could put anything under resources here. It's completely up to you how you're going to use that. In our scenarios, we just use, like, I'll be seeing this patient in room A and I'll need this machine. So I can have multiple items checked off under resources. It's just a nice way for me to sort of reserve information, whether it's a examination room, an iPad to deliver the treatment with, equipment I may want with me, art supplies or something, whatever that may be. You can create the resources. So before we start tinkering around with the schedule, how do we create those customizable types of appointments and resources? By going up in the upper left-hand corner, structurally, our ClinicSource is always sort of structured this way. And I know I didn't have a couple of you guys in my last training, so I want to make sure I cover this. ClinicSource is broken up by different components: documents, visits, patients, billing, so forth and so on. No matter what section we go to, the tools for that to affect that screen will always be located in the upper left-hand corner. Like, we don't get cute and put a button over here and put a button down there and put a button over here. We want to try to keep it as intuitive as possible so you guys don't, try to lessen the learning curve. All the tools will always be located in the upper left-hand corners. And since we're on schedule, the tools are in this upper left-hand corner. We use icons to represent what those tools are. But if you don't know, you can just hover your mouse over it and it'll tell you. In this case, this is new appointment. This is export calendar. This is appointment options, and that's what I wanted to cover with you guys. So I'm going to click on that little wheel cog underneath the word schedule, and it's going to open up my appointment options dialog box. And this is where I will create my customizable types of appointments and enter my resources. So here, my first tab that is selected are the types. So again, you see I've got this huge list. And remember, be very deliberate because trainers over the years have created all these crazy, wonky appointment types, and then they use them, and now I can't delete them. So I can't get rid of these kind of crazy types that are in the system right now. So that's just something I'd like to point out, double mention there. So to create appointment type, you just go in there and select the type of appointment you want to create. Right? So I would spell it out: Collin therapy, Emily therapy, Tracy therapy, whatever you want it to be. You can select that, create that type of appointment. It's completely customizable. So if I were to create a therapy appointment and select add, it'll drop it into this list below. And you'll notice now I want to scroll down to that therapy appointment. As you'll notice, as I'm scrolling down, each of these types of appointments that are created have a color box associated with them. And that color box is another way to allow us to delineate the appointment from another type of appointment. So we can colorize them so that when they're on the scheduler, they look that color. Okay, so when I scroll down to my therapy appointment, currently my therapy appointment is yellow. There it is. The appointment type I created is currently yellow. If I wanted to change that color, I don't want it to be yellow. Maybe it conflicts with something I've already colorized. I can then click on the wheel. I go down to the type that I just created, and then I click on the cog here under the type that I just created. It just opens up a color palette and allows me to choose the color I want to assign this type of appointment. In this case, I'm going to go with the lovely purple color. Purple is beautiful. So I've selected my color purple. So every time I create a therapy appointment, it's going to be purple. The next item over is your resources tab. Again, this list will be empty. So you'll have to populate it. And then once you start populating this list, resources will be available under your appointment options creation box. So again, it's just as easy as exam room A, add. Exam room B, add. Exam room C, 1, 2, 3, however you want to call it, completely customizable. That's up to you. Okay. So you'll create them, you'll have them, they'll be populated in here. So now there'll be an option for you to select from when you're in the appointment creation box. So that's how you create your customizable types of appointments and resources. Okay. So now let's sort of just tinker around a little bit with the schedule or talk about some of the functionality. With the schedule, it's very similar to anything that you may have used scheduling-wise in the past on calendars, whether it's your Outlook calendar or Google Calendar or anything like that. There's really not a whole lot of craziness going on, but there is some functionality I wanted to sort of point out to you guys. So I'm going to create an appointment on my calendar. And to create an appointment, I could certainly go up here to the alarm clock. It just gives me a blank appointment where I'd fill in the date and the time. But typically, I would be looking at my calendar for an available time slot and saying, okay, well, I have availability at 9 a.m. on Monday. Does that work for you, client? And if they say yes, I would click on the appointment date and time. And then that sort of opens up my dialog box and I can begin to enter the information. So my first thing I'm going to do is select the type of appointment, and I'm going to go down to therapy so we can see my color reflected. My patient information, if I have a large list of patients, I could just start typing in the patient's number or name, and by entering in the characters, it reduces that list of available options for me based on the characters I entered. So in this case, it's Homer Simpson. So I've created a therapy appointment for Homer Simpson. My therapist information is automatically entered because I have access as a therapist to create the calendar event. If you have an admin or maybe a scheduler person that does this, they'll just be able to select from anybody in the list by hitting the drop-down list. Okay. The subject line, I'll show you what we may use that in one of our examples here coming up. The location will always default to office unless you specify otherwise. And then your resources. So I can, again, select multiple resources. So I'm going to see Homer Simpson for his treatment in room A, and I'm going to need this item and this item, right? So I have multiple items checked. I can check off multiple items. I'm not just sort of limited to one particular item when it comes to resources. The start and end time. Since I clicked on 9 o'clock, the sort of the out of the box default is ClinicSource just assumes every appointment is an hour. I'm not sort of hogtied to that. I can certainly go in here and change 10 to 9:30 if I just wanted a half hour, to 11 if I wanted to, 12 if I wanted 3, so forth and so on. Okay, really, you've got any sort of availability with how you want to customize that. But for our purposes, we're just going to stick with that hour-long block. The next portion is setting up reoccurring appointments. If you're setting up reoccurring appointments,
Colin, can I just ask, can you change that default then? Because all our sessions are usually 30 minutes or 45, mostly 30.
Yeah, you can absolutely change the default. We just have to have programming do that, and that's something you'd request from Lauren.
Okay. And did you see my other message there too about scheduling?
It's good for us to see. Holly will be doing that part.
Yeah, so the department heads won't do any of this scheduling, but I didn't know that may be necessary for us to see this though, to see the EMR, because the EMR is the part they need to see, and maybe that's just how it's structured. Like we need to go over this first to see how the EMR works, but Holly will do all of the scheduling. The department heads will not do any of that.
Okay, well, Holly, is Holly comfortable with all that? Because I can move on from this, guys, if you don't want to cover this.
You met with Holly. It was either you or Steven that met with Holly and Marla about the scheduling.
Okay, good.
Or maybe it was EMR.
Okay, good. So
I don't want to disrupt what you need to do. If we
no. I don't want to waste
your
guys' time. I want to focus on what the information you guys need. If she's gotten the training, I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah. So yeah, when I talked to Lauren, the EMR part, I think you already did with Holly and Marla. They just need to see it from a clearinghouse perspective, but we just need to see it from a therapist perspective.
Right. Got you. Got you. Okay. So you're talking about the documentation phase, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, you got it.
Okay, cool.
Actually,
So
Hey Melanie, though, it would be nice to see what the appointments look like in the scheduler, since we'll be looking at them,
okay.
and like how it delineates where our what like the resources in the office, or like which rooms we're in. Just if he could go through that real quick, just so we know
Sure,
what to
sure.
look
No
for.
problem. So I'll go ahead and just create an appointment on the schedule here for my therapy appointment that I selected as purple. Boom. And I'll add it to the, so let me add a Monday and a Tuesday and then add it. So on my schedule, I have my two appointments. Once the appointments are created, there's some good information that you guys will be able to see on here. One of the things is you have two icons that are referenced right next to my physician name. My physician name or the therapist name is in these brackets here, CR. So since it's on the schedule, it kind of already starts to, hide some of this information for patient privacy stuff. So I could see the therapist who's delivering it, who the patient is, but there's these two bits of information, the triangle and then the dollar sign. That is letting me know that when we set up the patient file for Homer Simpson, that I noted that he has an allergy or he has an alert or precaution that's associated with him. Okay, so that's something that you can always, be aware of when you're looking at the schedule. All I do is I hover my mouse over it, and it'll tell me what that is, what are the allergies that they assigned him is. In this case, he has an allergy to lemons, and he has a sensitivity to noise. It could be seizures. It could be really anything that I want you as a therapist to be aware of prior to going into the room with the patient or treating the patient. And then there's also the copay associated down here that is being tracked with the dollar sign. Okay, so that's kind of the pivotal information that's sort of coming across. Also, this icon, the circle, is basically letting you know it's part of a reoccurring appointment. Because typically, if you did it every other week or every week, I wouldn't see the other scheduled appointment on there. But it's nice to know that this is part of a reoccurring appointment. So I'm seeing Homer every Monday from 9 to 10 for however many weeks that was assigned to him. Okay. So it's kind of the information that's being fed. Now, a lot of times with documentation, let's just go into the documentation. So I'm going to mosey on over to the documentation window now. I'm going to get rid of these files here in Homer Simpson stuff real quick. So we can start from the top here. Okay, so I have Homer Simpson and I have Jon Snow. Jon Snow's got some medical records in his patient file. Homer Simpson has nothing. He's got no records to display. So when I'm on my documentation, the right-hand side of the major portion of the screen is basically the patient's file, right? So it's kind of sorted as such. The first column is your document column. This column is calling out what type of document this line represents. This is an evaluation. This is a care plan. This is an evaluation. This is a care plan, so forth and so on. This second column here is the checkoff box. We have tools that once the documents are created, I can print it up. If I wanted to print any of these documents, the first thing I need to tell ClinicSource is what's the document I want to print. So that's what these checkboxes are about. I want to do something with this care plan. In this case, it's printed up, and I'd hit the print button, and it would print it up. And we're going to do this here in a second. This third column over is an ID column. It's just an ID column that ClinicSource uses to ID the document. Doesn't mean anything to you guys. It's basically for ClinicSource to keep track of the information and to proliferate it into the future documents. Date column is the date the document was created. Okay. The eval and the POC date is if I, like, for instance, I created this evaluation back in June of 2021. At that time, I did enter a reeval date on that document when I created it originally back in 2021. So that's what this column is showing me, that this guy has a reevaluation coming up in February of 2023. The therapist column is the therapist who created the document. Okay. The type will tell you the type, the discipline that the document was created using: physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. The diagnosis procedure codes, pretty obvious. This is tracking the diagnosis codes or the procedure codes. In this case, they're all evaluations and care plans. There's not a treatment note. If there was a treatment note in there, I would see the procedure code, 92571 or whatever that treatment code would be. And then I have these signature columns. So you guys sound like you have a big clinic. You may have a sort of a supervisor signature process that you'll go through. So you'll have your therapist signing the documents and maybe even a supervisor that reviews the documents to sign as well. So you'll have two columns here. Right out of the box, you guys, you're just going to have the regular physician signature available. So if you want a supervisor signature column opened up, you just request that and programming would turn it on. There's no extra charge for that. They just have to sort of flip a switch in the background to create the table for them. So the signature column is letting you know that these documents were signed with a clinician's signature. Some of these documents aren't signed. The difference between a document that's signed with the clinical signature, at the bottom, basically means that I can't edit any of these documents once they've been clinically signed. The only thing I can do is add an amendment to any of these documents. So if I were to say this evaluation that I created back in June of 2021, I forgot to add something or I need to add some information to that document, I could click on it to open up the evaluation. But once I see that clinical signature, I'll know that I can't get into that original valuation as I created it back in June of 2021. The only thing I'll be able to do is add an amendment. And, here under the document, when you're in a document or creating a document, you'll have this pen signature. This is your signed current active document. When I clicked on that button, that's what dropped my therapist signature in the bottom of the document, essentially locking that document up at that point. So when I hit the edit button, if I didn't have my signature, I would be able to open the document. In this case, since it's signed, once I hit edit, the only thing that's going to be available to me is the amendment. So I can go in here and add any of the data that I left out in the amendment and then clinically sign it with my signature at the bottom, again, then locking that document back up. In this case, I'm just going to save it. So just keep that in mind. Any document that's been signed, I can certainly go in there and look at it and view it as a whole, but I can't edit it. I can only add an amendment to it. Okay. And that's sort of your patient file, how it's sort of sorted out. So let's talk about the
Just
tool.
real quick,
Go ahead.
Colin, if I could. So once you sign the document, does it automatically send it to the clearinghouse, or that's a separate step?
Nope, that's in the billing, right? That's how we get into billing. We create a visit, and then we go to billing, and then we take a visit, and we turn it into an invoice.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. But signing, I can invoice a document even though it's not been signed. So that's not sort of a threshold that I have to meet before I can invoice any document. It's just part of the process. Some require it, some don't, but it doesn't preclude you from being able to invoice anything. So let's talk about the buttons that create the document. So we looked at a file that had documents in there. Now we're going to create Homer Simpson's profile so that when we go to the scheduler and we create a visit, because typically what I would recommend is creating a visit right out of the scheduler, because you get added functionality out of your visits. Because what you'll realize is and basically, I don't know how you guys are going to do this. This is a business process that's specific per clinic, is when I'm creating documents, I usually, typically each clinic has their own process on how they do that. Some clinics allow you to create the visit and enter a charge code and don't even insert the note. I'll do that at the end of the day or at the end of the week, but I'm just going to record the charge, save it, and then I'll go back and insert the note and then fill out my note. Some clinics open up the visit, enter the charge code, insert the notes, maybe add some notes to it, but don't sign it. I'll wait till the end of the day so I can review all of my notes at the end of the day and make sure everything's copacetic before I clinically sign it. Some clinics create the note, enter the charge code, insert the note, finish it out, and sign it right there in front of the client. I don't know how your guys' process is going to work on that. Every clinic is different, but I'll show you everything with regards to that process. So step one is Homer Simpson. I have all these buttons up top. The first 5 buttons are my document creation buttons. This is how I create the documents. The next 3 are, once I've created the documents, these are the 3 buttons that I would use to affect the documents that I'm creating, that I've created, okay? So starting from the top, from left to right, the first button with the stethoscope and the plus, if I hover my mouse over, it tells me This is the new evaluation. The next button over is the new care plan. The next button over is your progress, or new summary. This is kind of like a progress report that I can attach, because if I use goals in my plan of care, each time I see a visit with a patient, I'm tracking the progress of these goals that I've assigned this patient out of my care plan. And a progress report will sort of lock into that care plan and automatically track that. So every visit that I do and I record the progress of the patient, I can go to the summary and just look at it. It'll automatically update every time I create a treatment note for that patient and update those goals. The next button over is my new progress note. I can create a progress note this way if I wanted. And then we'll have a fifth button, and this will be your new patient forms. And this will contain your HIPAA forms, your consent to treat forms, your release forms, your intake forms. All of these types of forms are typically located under the new patient form button. So those are 5 buttons, and we're going to create these documents here in a second. The next 3 buttons are, once the documents are created in my patient's file, what I can do to affect them. The first button is a copy button. And you're saying to yourself, well, why might I use a copy button? And the best example I have is this evaluation that I did back in June of 2021. Let's just say we got in our little time machine and it's now February of 2023, and it's time to do the reeval for this patient. I've got 2 choices at this point. I mean, I can certainly start at the top, create a new evaluation right from scratch. But as you guys know, a lot of the evaluation information is just historical information or data that doesn't change even for a reeval. I'll need to update some data, maybe adjust my diagnoses based on my treatments. But there's a lot of data in an evaluation that I would have to recreate that I really, don't need to. So that's what I might use the copy button. I'd select that evaluation and I'd make a copy of it. And once I do that, it's basically, you'll notice it takes my physician's signature out of the document. It's making an exact copy replica of that document as it was in June of 2021. I'd plug in my reeval date. I can even plug in a newer reeval date if I wanted. I could change the diagnosis if I needed. But now when I hit my edit button up top here next to my pen, it's opening up the document, and all the data that's in there is the same data that I entered in June of 2021. So I can go in there just to the appropriate fields and update only the data that I need to update, keeping everything else the same. That way I'm not having to recreate it. I'm just making an exact copy replica of it, updating the pertinent information, and then clinically signing it if I'm ready to sign the document. Once I sign it and save it, now I'll have my reevaluation in place, the date it was created, who created it, and what the diagnosis codes are. Okay, so that's the copy button. The next button over
Hey,
is,
Colin, I have a quick question.
Shoot.
You are you have one of the patients highlighted and we see all of their documentation. Does it include documentation from other therapists as well, or just us, like your documentation?
Well, no. In my patient file is going to show everybody. So I'm seeing multiple.
Everyone. Okay.
Yeah. Good question.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it'll show everybody's information, not just yours. Okay. So copying a document, again, I use a checkbox to select the document I want to make a copy of. And then I just hit the copy button. All it does is creates a PDF out of it. Really nice official looking document with all of our information in the upper right hand corner, our clinic name and address, and the document as it stands. I can download a physical copy, an electronic copy of it, and do whatever I want with it. Or I can print it out and have a physical copy to triple fold, send snail mail, or hand across the desk to somebody. So that's the print. And then finally, next to that is the fax or email document. Again, select the document you want to fax or email. Click on the fax email document button. Opens up my send secure message dialog box. The first tab that is selected is email. Very simply, what's the destination email? Subject, message. It'll come as an attachment, and I can lock the attachment up by the patient's social or date of birth. So when the patient or the individual receiving this document attempts to open up that attachment, it'll say, what's the last 4 digits of the social, or what's the DOB? Okay. Fax is very similar. What's the destination fax number, subject, message, and it'll come as a separate page, unlocked, unlike our email. And when I hit send, it'll fax it out. Okay, so
Hey,
those are,
Colin, so if you don't lock it by the social or the date of birth, is it, it's still secure? Because I'm just thinking like some schools, they're not going to, or, you know, they may not have the social or the date of birth readily available to open it. So if we don't select that, is it still HIPAA compliant if we send it without locking it?
yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's just like one extra step, kind of like a
Well,
two-step.
you can change it whatever you want, right? So you could put a note in here and say doctor's name, you know what I mean? However you want to do it. I don't, you know, you can determine whatever that password is, right? If you want to lock it
So,
up, you determine the best way to do it. It will come as an attachment, and it is HIPAA compliant, but you can still create your own password and hint if you want.
but if you don't lock it, you're saying it's still HIPAA compliant. So what
Correct.
would the purpose be of locking it then? Why would you need that if it's already HIPAA compliant without it?
Some people just like to lock them up. Some people require it, right? So here's the deal with
Oh, okay.
ClinicSource. 9 times out of 10, everybody comes up with questions like, "Can ClinicSource do this?" The thing to keep in mind is we're sort of across all different states, all different type of environments, all sorts of different insurance requirements. It's not, you know, whether we can do it, it's how we do it, right? And this is one of those scenarios. There's certain regions, certain insurances, certain doctors, certain clinics that require them to be locked up by the social or the date of birth. So that's why they're there as an available option. But if I don't choose either one of them and I hit send, it's still HIPAA compliant. We're still going through a secure database. It's just not using those additional methods to lock up the document. Okay. So that's your sort of your document creation and effect buttons. So let's create some documentation. So you've got a couple of things, and I want to cover everything with you guys because I feel like you're going to have all sorts of different type of scenarios. So let's start with Homer Simpson, since we're going to create our visits out of the scheduler for Homer Simpson, because we're gaining functionality if we do it that way. So here's my patient. I've got Homer Simpson. The first thing I need to do is create his evaluation and care plan and get those in place so that I can start tracking that information through my treatments. So I've selected my patient, and the first thing I want to do is I want to add an evaluation. So I'm going to click on the evaluation button. The top of the form is really primarily the only information that's sort of being used electronically to replicate and move forward into additional documentation. So that's why this header first comes up. I can call it out whether it's initial or a re-eval. I've got my patient, my therapist selected, and the discipline type that I'm creating the evaluation under, the date that it's created, and I could certainly go back here and backdate this. I'm not sort of, you know, hamstruck with having to do today's. I can go back and maybe I did it a while ago. Like for instance, our first example is, let's say you have a patient that you did an evaluation for them back in June of 2021. You know, I have an electronic copy of it saved. I don't want to have to recreate it from scratch. So I would just go into the patient, backdate the information on the evaluation when I originally created it. I have an electronic copy saved somewhere in my database. Then I identify my diagnosis codes. And then rather than inserting a blank evaluation, I would hit the attachment because I have his original evaluation. Maybe I scanned it. I did it on paper. Maybe I scanned it. Maybe I did it in an old ERMRS and I don't want to have to recreate it from scratch. By using the attachment method, I can click on that. It'll just open up my file navigator, and then I could go find my eval folders that I keep them all in. And then I can find Homer's evaluation, click on it, and then upload the file. And then really, because this is the most important information that it requires, and then it'll attach that file right here to your system so I don't have to recreate it from scratch. Okay. I can't do that with the plan of care because there's functionality that you're getting out of the plan of care, but you can attach an evaluation and backdate the evaluation. I can also backdate the plan of care to match my evaluation, but I still have to use the template for the plan of care to gain the functionality that I'll be gaining out of that. And I could do the same thing with my treatment note. You see your treatment notes will have the same thing. I can do attachments if I just want to get my patient file in ClinicSource up to date with what I've already done with the patient. So in this case, this scenario, we've attached the old evaluation that I've done for the patient, and now his evaluation will be in place. Clinically, it'll look like he's got an evaluation in there. However, if I was creating it from scratch, and today I can then plug in a reeval, identify my diagnoses, and then you'll have your speech therapy evaluation. You'll have your physical therapy, occupational therapy. Depending on who the patient is when they create this, will automatically sort to their discipline, okay? So I'll insert the document. Once I insert the template, again, this is just a template. This is our out-of-the-box template, okay? You guys may have a different idea of what you want your evaluation and your plan of care and your treatment notes to have. And we could create those under templates so that you have your own customized templates. But these are just out of the box that we have currently in the system. You have a couple of options. You can create them, trying to create them using the template method. And we do have a template training so you can have somebody train up on that and assign them that training. Or you can just send those evaluations, care plans, and SOAP notes to us. We can recreate them for a charge, and then they'll be in the system. It's a one-time charge. Once they're in, they're in. You don't ever have to worry about it. Your template is in there.
Quick question on the templates.
You bet.
Are those, if we made them, that would be accessible to everyone, then it wouldn't be specific to each therapist?
Yeah, you can determine who you want to have them accessible to. You can make it
Okay.
open to everybody, open to just a discipline, or open to just an individual.
Okay. And is there a limit on like number of templates?
Negative. You can make as many as you want.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect.
Good question. Love it. Okay. So here's my, just like I said, out of the box cookie cutter version of evaluation for speech therapy. You'll see it's collecting information from the patient profile. It's also grab my diagnoses up top here. And then I would just go about adding into my evaluation for the patient. The right-hand side is the document as a whole. Okay. So each of these documents are made up of components, bits and pieces. This is the speech therapy evaluation header component. This is the significant history component, so forth and so on. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, I have a huge list of additional components. Anything that's got a blue check mark is already in the document. Okay. But if I created a template and I just have this one-off with this patient, like just for this patient, I want to add this particular component, maybe this 9 to 12 CELF5 form or component, it won't change my template. So the next patient that comes in, it'll go revert back to the way my template is set up. But I can add it for this patient because this is the only 9 to 12 patient that I have in my current document, but I need this component just for this patient. It'll add that component into the evaluation for you. And then when I save it, and then I see my next patient, I do my next evaluation, that component won't be in there. I just added it for this one because it's not part of the template. And I can remove any component by clicking on the checkbox, and it'll remove that component. Okay. So even though your template is here, you can still add components as you need them. But at the end of the day, the initial template will contain all the mandatory components at the very least, I guess is the best way to say that. So you'd go about completing your evaluation of the patient. Once the fields are filled, you can sign it with your physician's signature if it's finalized, moving on, right? In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and save it. So now my evaluation is placed. I see the date it was created, the therapist who created the discipline, and the diagnosis code. And I also noticed that it hasn't been signed because there's no pen over here. So once I've identified the evaluation, I've got it in place, I'm ready to now create the care plan. I click on the care plan. So I first select the evaluation that I'm assigning the care plan to. And then I click on care plan. And again, here's my care plan. Again, if I need to do the care plan from scratch, but if I needed to backdate it, I could certainly go back here and backdate it. But in this case, it's a brand new care plan. So I'm going to go ahead and just insert it. Again, your template will look specific to your business, but each of these components are different components, and I can add additional components if I need them. The only thing missing from this one is the physician signature panel. Otherwise, it has everything in it right now. Okay. So again, it's grabbing stuff from my evaluation, the diagnosis that I identified for the evaluation, the patient information, the original date of the evaluation is on there as well. I can go about assigning how I'm going to go about treating the patient based on the information collected in the evaluation. Okay. Most of these are data entry fields or radio buttons or drop down values for the different sections. Like here, I have a copy of a section in my template. So to remove any portion that you may not need, you could just use the black X in the right-hand corner and it'll remove that particular component. I have a couple of copies here. And again, here's my modalities and interventions that I set up under modalities and interventions. So rather than having to write them every time, I could just check them off and then it'll add it to my goals. And then I can continue filling out the information. The goal panel is really the unique part of the plan of care. You know, everything else is just sort of data entry, direct entry, where the goal panel requires a couple of steps before it's sort of added to your plan of care to track that data. First, I have to choose the term of the goal. So is it short term, is it long term, or is it just not applicable? So to assign a short term goal, I select the term of short, and then I'll scroll through my list, find the goal I want to assign. So I've selected short and the goal I want to define, and now I need to add it by hitting this little target with the plus. It doesn't get added until I hit that button. So now it adds it down here to my plan of care. I can do the same thing with the long-term goal. Again, term, select the goal, add it. So now I've got a short-term goal, I've got a long-term goal, and just a regular old goal. In any of these terms, I can select multiples. I'm not sort of just stuck with just selecting one at a time. I can select multiples if I want to assign multiple goals as well. So here you'll see the difference between short-term, long-term, and just regular old goals. And they will be tracked in the order that they were sort of assigned or sent into the system. Once I'm finished assigning this plan of care for the patient, all right, Homer, wonderful. I gave you some goals. When I see you next Monday on our appointment, I'll make the evaluation and we'll see where you stand. I can clinically sign the document with my clinical signature here. In this case, I'm just going to save it. And now I have my evaluation and my care plan in place. So typically, I'd be sitting out here. Now, as a physician, there's a couple different ways that I could do visits. But the way I wanted to show you is creating it out of the appointment adds functionality. But I mean, I could certainly go to visits, select my patient from the list, and then hit visit. But I'm getting added functionality if I do it out of the scheduler. So out of the scheduler, I would just click on the appointment. Oh, great. Homer's finally come in. I've done his evaluation and his care plan in his last visit. He's coming in for his first initial visit after that. I click on the appointment. It opens up the edit appointment dialog box. And this button right here with the two people with the green plus is create a new visit from appointment. And when I create the visit out of the appointment, it automatically drops in my diagnosis codes, who the patient is. I can then select my procedure code that I'm treating the patient for today. You'll notice it also brings up my authorization information from my credit card, or not from my credit card, but from my insurance. So I see he's at 10 of 10 visits. I know I'm going to get paid at this. This is his first initial visit that is going to start tracking. So this one, at his next visit will be 9 of 10. The next visit after that will be 8 of 10. So it sort of counts down from the top. And again, if I had a note in the system and I'm just doing catch up, I can certainly backdate the date of the visit and then attach an old visit so I can get my documentation file up to date. In this case, it's a new visit. He's actually come in for this visit. Here's my SOAP note template. I hit select insert. And it drops my treatment note. So it went into my plan of care and it's already grabbed my goals for me. I would, it's grab my charge code for the patient. So I could go in here and enter in my information. Great, excellent. And here you'll see the modalities are tracked over in your intervention section. And then to the left are your objectives, your goals. So you have your assistance levels, speech therapy, you have your assistance levels, you have your levels, of the skill level of the goal, and then you have your achieve levels. So you'll notice that the last column underneath each of these is not filled in because we haven't set them up yet. This is his first initial visit. So now I'm sort of going to be tracking that going from here forward. Okay, so I would then track the progress of the history of the patient. Excellent job, Homer. I really love your work. You're doing great. Hang in there, kiddo. Keep going. We'll see you next Monday, and then we'll track your progress. So when I open up my next visit, this last will reflect 40. This last will reflect 20, right? Whatever the value is in here now, my next sub note will reflect whatever these values I put in these boxes are. Okay. So once I finish with my visit, I'm not sure if you guys require patient caregiver signatures in your region. Is that a thing where you guys are at?
No,
okay.
it's not.
Okay, gotcha. If so, it's just this little button right here, real simple. This doesn't lock the document up either. It just adds an area for you to have the patient caregiver signature. So if I'm done with the treatment with the patient, I could sign it. In this case, I'm going to go through a review process. So I'm just going to save it. I want to review it. When I close the doors at 5, I'm going to go through and review all my notes from top to bottom just to make sure everything's good before I sign the document. Again, notice the color change here. So this is the sort of the added functionality I'm gaining out of this. I'm getting my appointment turned from purple to green. That's just a visual reference for me as the physician to know, okay, Homer came in and I entered a treatment note for that patient. Green means seen. Okay. So that's kind of, so when he comes in next Monday and I create the visit out of the appointment, select my charge code, insert my treatment note. There's the 9 of 10 visits. Now it's down to 8. See, there's my tracking of my information that I entered last time. So it's tracking all that information and I can update it. Right. And then save it. So my visits are in there. So in my documentation, the reason I did 2 visits because I want to show you that summary as well. It may be something you guys want to use. So to create the summary for those visits, I need to check off the box for the evaluation and the care plan that I want the summary to sort of start recording from. And then I click new summary. It's going to take me into my summary document. And here's my tracking of my history. So I see most of my goals. My patient is moving in the right direction, improving on their achievements. Some of them, they're downward spiraling on some of their achievements. So it's just a nice sort of tracking record. So every time I create a visit, this will get updated. This isn't very exciting to look at because it's just 2 visits, but as this adds, I'll have peaks and valleys. So I'll be able to have a nice little visual report that when I save it and it's in my system, that summary, since it's attached to the evaluation and care plan with each visit, will continue to update that summary automatically. And then at any point in time, periodically, I could go into that summary and view it and see how the progress is doing with the patient. It'll tell me his average, tell me all this information. Okay, all the treatment codes that I'm seeing the patient for and using for the patient. Just kind of a cool little report that I like to show everybody. And that's the summary. So we've created some visits. We've created our clinical documentation. The last thing I want to show you guys is the therapist dashboard, which is kind of a nice tool because, again, as I mentioned out of the top, I don't know how you guys are going to do documentation, whether you're going to sign them right there in front of the patient, whether you wait to the end of the day, whatever that is, whatever that process is, the therapist dashboard will be helpful. And it's this upper left-hand corner. It looks like a speedometer in the very top left-hand corner of the window. It's called the therapist dashboard. I click on that. And it's basically just sort of a centralized field that I can use to track. As an admin, I'll be able to see all my therapists up here and all their appointments. I can see all the different patients, when their last visit is, when their next visit is. I could track each individual therapist KPI. I could see them for a week, month, or year, how many evals, first visits, all this kind of business. I could track the visits history here compared to last year. This is this year compared to last year. treatment code for the week, month, or year. But probably the best part about it is this to-do section, right? The to-do section is going to be sort of your catch-all. So if there's any documents in the system that aren't signed, this is what the to-do list does for you. It just lets you know, hey, you have notes in the system, Colin, without signatures. And what's nice about that is, yes, it tells me that I've missed signing these notes by Homer, but they'll be here in chronological, because maybe my process is I wait till the end of the day to sign all my documents. I could just go right to the therapist dashboard. I don't have to fish through my documentation to find them all. That can get sort of tedious, fishing through clinical doc files like that. I go to my therapist dashboard, I go to the to-do list, it just organizes them nice and sweet. Here's my notes without signature. Click on the first one, click on the icon, takes me right to that note. I could do my review with my edit button, open it up, review it, make sure everything's good. Okay, I've added the appropriate notes. Now I can sign it. It will be removed from that dashboard, and then I would move on to the next one. So that's the therapist dashboard. I like to show everybody that because it's kind of a cool tool. I want to make sure everybody sort of gets a peek at that. Because as a therapist, I'll just see Colin Renner's information. As an admin, I will see everybody's information. So really, I can track it however I want to track it, depending on what my allowances are in ClinicSource. Okay, that's kind of my spiel there on the documentation, you guys. Are there any questions, any stuff that's sort of specific to your business unit that I didn't cover that maybe you have questions about? Open forum, any question whatsoever can deal with anything.
Are you able to show us how to do the billing, or is that a separate training?
The billing is part 3A, and that'll be the next training.
Okay.
And we'll do that in your database. So, we'll create a visit, we'll turn a visit from a visit into an invoice, and we'll walk you through that process. But there's a lot of pre-check that I need to go into your account. I'll cover with you, make sure everything's set up properly. It takes about 45 minutes to do that training.
Okay, got it.
And that'll be the next one, and Lauren will be reaching out to you for that, to schedule that one. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been in communication with Lauren about a couple of things. So maybe she might be the one I need to follow up with as far as doing calculating productivity. I don't know what ClinicSource's capabilities are as far as calculating productivity between clinic and school billing, since we'll be doing the invoicing there too.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if you have customers or clients that use ClinicSource for their actual like labor logs, like time logs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When you're under your setup and you're creating your user profiles, that's one of the things, the pay rates by procedure codes.
And does that calculate productivity though?
You can use it to kind of calculate productivity. There's going to be reports in there that you'll be able to use to calculate productivity that include multiple assets within ClinicSource in order to do that, right? So pay rate by procedure code may not be the best way, but it'll be one of the elements that you'll use to collect that data. Not only how many visits, how many notes they're entering, but also some of these other elements. So you'll add multiple elements into a report that'll help you with that productivity information. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can. Would Lauren be the person to talk more in depth about that? Because our productivity is pretty detailed as far as if it's school or clinic or groups. Would she be the one to see once if
Lauren
that is
will
something?
definitely be the person. She's kind of like the massive, awesome gatekeeper, and she knows all of our assets. So we're basically this huge, giant company. ClinicSource is just one of the companies that we manage with these ERMSs medically. So we have this huge team scattered across the contiguous United States, and we have specialists in all these different areas. And Lauren knows all of them, and she'll be able to say, yes, Melanie, you need to speak to so-and-so. They'll go over this with you in great detail to sort of match exactly the specificity that you're looking for.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sounds good. I don't have any other questions from today, but yeah, thanks for the information. That was good to see for sure. And then I don't know if Emily or Tracy have anything else, but I know Colin, you sent me the link for the recording last time too. If you don't mind doing that again, that'd be awesome.
I will do it again. Just it's going to be probably around. Give me about an hour to get that going. It's going to take 30 minutes for it to process.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no rush. Yep, that works.
You got it. Any questions, Emily or Tracy, other than that?
No, that was very helpful. I'm excited to get to use this.
Groovy, get in there, start tinkering around. You can't break anything we can't fix, anything we can't get rid of, anything we can't correct. So, you're absolutely, do what you guys got to do. If you have any just sort of generalized questions or any roadblocks that you run into, I would recommend using support@clinicsource.com. Those will get you to a support person that'll sort to the specific person, because they're all different specialities and they'll be able to help you out. So that's a really good resource for you guys to use as well, if you just sort of hit a roadblock and you're in between trainings or something like that.
Okay. And I think with Melanie, we'll just have to talk about the templates and all of that. I think that's probably the biggest concern for the therapist at this point. But
right,
yeah, it sounds like it should. Yeah, I think we can alleviate their concerns by just customizing them. It's just going to be pretty quick to just be able to click on what you want rather than handwrite everything. So, but yeah,
exactly.
We can talk about that.
Well, Colin, you had mentioned that either we go through a training to put templates in, or we provide them for you to do it.
Yeah, you can give them to us. Like, you can have, these are my models. You guys recreate my models. Again, they do charge. It's just a one-time charge. Once they're created, they're in there for good. But,
Okay.
you can also attempt to go through, set up templates and create your own templates. Under help feature, you go to your user guide and you search templates. We have all the instructional information in there, right?
Okay.
So you can attempt it yourself if you want. Certainly, give it a shot. But we do have a separate template training class that you can see as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Creating a new form, it'll walk you all the way through the process. So again, feel free to give it a shot. Ski, you can't break anything we can't fix. So
okay, thanks.
Okay. Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. We'll go ahead and we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you so much. Lauren will be reaching out to you shortly. Melanie, look out for that email, and I'll get you this recording pronto.